All right, guys, welcome to Alam's podcast. Today on the show, we have Jack Donovan. Jack is an incredible author, content creator, a barbarian, jiu-jitsu practitioner, fitness enthusiast extraordinaire. I've been following his content for quite some time now. Absolutely love it. Jack, happy to have you here today, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Jack, we're going to kick right into it. So you are an author. Let's talk about what books have you written and what really brought you into that?
Well, what I'm best known for is I put out a book in 2012 called The Way of Men. And it was basically my attempt to define masculinity in a way that made sense for everybody. Because if you look at the way a lot of different people talk about masculinity, it's like, well, whoever they grew up with or whatever situation they were in and their particular culture. And that made it very confusing for a lot of people because, well, what is masculinity? What is that really? Is it even real?
Right.
So I started to, try to figure out, well, what's always been true? What has masculinity always meant? And so basically the Way of Men goes back into the evolutionary history of man and like, well, what have we been doing for like thousands and thousands of years over and over again? What is our job? And basically the theory of the Way of Men is what I call gang theory of masculinity. Whereas a lot of people like to approach it, thinking like that we're just, I don't know, like elks or something, fighting for mates. I'm like, well, that's not actually the way humans interact. If you think about it, men get together in groups and they kind of pre-select each other. Men fight to get in groups and like who's the best guy in the group and whatever. Really before mates ever even happen. That's we have our own status hierarchy, and that's because for thousands of thousands of years we've been in these small groups that have had to defend territory against outsiders and bears and all kinds of things. It's like you had a whole bunch of guys who had to depend on each other for very specific things. And I think that's how we still judge each other as men based on our evolutionary psychology. We still look at each other and like, well, what would that guy be worth in an emergency? Is he all about himself? Is he able to do anything? Is he capable? And so what I came up with was 4 tactical virtues. The first one is strength. There's strength, courage, mastery, and honor. And strength is obvious. It's part of we're men. We are naturally stronger. That's biologically part of what we are. But obviously, when you're looking at other men, you're sizing them up. You're like, is it, can I push that guy around? Is it, is he someone who I want on my team or someone who I wish was on the other team because it'd make it easy?
Right.
So strength is a big, obvious one. Obviously, courage. And the same thing, strength and courage find any culture in human history. And masculinity has always been associated with strength and courage. They've never said that weak guy who's afraid of everything over there, that is the most masculine man I know.
I'm going to follow him.
Yeah. I mean, that's not real. So that's why I think it's a human universal. Courage obviously is a pretty obvious concept, but it falls into many categories. You're looking at a man saying like, well, if we're going to have to go do something risky, is he going to be able to do that? Or is he going to be afraid? Can we count on him? And mastery is the third virtue that I talk about. And obviously we appreciate skill in each other. Men, there's this great, it's kind of related. There's a great quote from The Godfather, like, women and children can afford to be careless, but men can never afford to be careless. And, is this guy competent? Can he carry his own weight? Does he have skills to offer? Because, I have this, guy who was a special forces guy for years and years and years. And he thought it was amazing because he never thought, being the kind of hard charging guy, he never realized until he started doing reenactments of wars with people and just getting volunteers to do these reenactments, that some guys just want to be the cook, and that's okay. Because he always thought, well, everyone wants to be a commando, of course. But no, some guys are cool with just being the cook. So is he good at cooking? Like, can he carry his weight in some way? And so that's, the mastery portion of it. And then obviously honor, I think, has to do with your reputation as a man in a group. And that's the fundamental. You can get really elaborate with what honor means to people. But at the end of the day, the core definition of honor is really, what is your reputation to the men who you respect? And by demonstrating that you care about their opinion, it shows that they can trust you. Because, if you're like, I don't care about anybody's opinion of me, whatever, in this group, who cares? Well, they can't really trust you to back them up in any kind of situation, or like, because honor is what makes us many times do things that we didn't want to do, but we probably should do, but maybe, if we could get away with it, then we wouldn't do it. So those are the four tactical virtues that I've talked about in The Way of Men, and that's been when I wrote The Way of Men many years ago. There weren't a lot of guys writing about masculinity. Now we have this huge space where everybody's talking about masculinity. You have your Jockos and your Jordan Peterson, whatever, but that really wasn't around then. So it made a kind of a big impact because I was one of the first guys who were talking about it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So there's a lot to unpack there. We got to dive in. So first, right off the bat, I love what you said about men pre-qualifying men. I've said this for years. You do immediately size up other men, and it's not only physical, but that's the first one. You're going to quickly just size up right away their mechanical skeletal structure. So the first thing I look at in a man is like right away I judge them. How do they take care of themselves? That's going to be based on posture, if they've got legs or not. Right away, you can tell if there's an athleticism, and then you look into how they carry themselves, how they speak. So that is true. Like most men, especially from tribal society, you're not looking to befriend someone who's essentially worthless to you. So
Right.
you said they're not looking to bring someone on because you're like, hey, if there's 10 of us, all 10 of us might have to fight. I don't want dead weight and have to protect you. We have women to protect. So I
Exactly.
love the idea of that, right? That's huge. How much would you say that combat is, comes into play right now in masculinity, the ability to actually be able to be dangerous?
Well, I mean, it always has. That's always been a huge part of masculinity. And one of the big things that people say is like, oh, we don't need to be like that anymore. But that's not necessarily the case. Especially we've seen over the past few years, there's unrest in all kinds of portions of the world, and that may not be true. You may not live in this safe little bubble of protected society. So it's important to have those kind of skills. And I think, as you know, I'm sure when you have done a good amount of sparring or fighting or whatever, you do carry yourself a little bit different, and you
Yeah.
have a different way of assessing that what that situation is, rather than the joke of the guy who's like, "You don't know, I see red," but
Yeah.
has never
Yeah.
done
You don't know
anything.
once I get mad. Right.
Yeah.
I made a video about this recently. So, yeah, I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 17 years. I competed in 4 world championships. I'm a black belt, and that was like it consumed a big portion of my life, martial arts as a whole. But Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu particularly just really consumed me, and the
Mhm.
complex problem-solving nature and the physical sparring equaled so much stress relief for me daily that it allowed me to just like find something I needed through my 20s and young 30s. And so I was with a teammate the night that came to visit. I live on the beach in Florida, and he came to visit. We haven't seen each other in years, and he's a black belt as well. We went out to dinner, and there was a small altercation that happened between two vacationing dads, and they were about to fight each other at the restaurant. And they didn't end up fighting, but there was a lot of things said, a lot of cussing happened. And we sat there just sipping our beers, eating our coconut shrimp, and just kind of laugh. And we're like, look at these guys, like everything's verbal, like they're just like yelling about what they do. And what I always talk about is like men who have trained fighting and who have been in a lot of physical scenarios are the nicest, calmest, and least likely to fight guys that there are. So that's where combat equals masculinity. If you have it, one, you're not really looking to over posture. You're way more likely to let someone bump you in the shoulder and be like, hey, it's all good, man, no worries, and just walk by. You don't feel there's anything to prove anymore. But two, you have a different air about you, different energy that goes back to our sizing each other up. Even men who don't know you can just feel it on you. They can feel something about that guy. I don't really want to look for a problem. So we always say, like, when you train fighting or you train combat, you have less of it than ever. So you're not going to get into street fights anymore. Not I'm going to get in fights and win. No, you're just never going to get in one again because no one's going to pick you to start that with,
Yeah, they always say, like, in self-defense, don't look like a victim. And
Yeah.
obviously you don't look like a victim if you have that air about you.
Yeah, eye contact and confidence. So I love that. So yeah, so where do you live? Where are you based out of?
Right now I'm in Arizona.
Love it. And I've seen a lot of your content. You're in the desert. So
Yeah.
what is that like? Do you get a lot of sun? What is your lifestyle like there?
Oh, well, I lived in Salt Lake City for a while. I was in Oregon for a few years, and I moved down here for the weather and just, because there was more space and more houses to rent and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And yeah, aesthetically, I like it. And I like that it's whatever, probably 75 degrees right now in the middle of January. That's nice. And the desert's fantastic. It's just a new landscape. I grew up in Pennsylvania. So it's just a
Okay.
totally, yeah. But I've been drawn to the desert for many years, and so I'm happy to be here.
I love it. You consider yourself to be an outdoorsman? You like the outdoors a lot?
I would say that I go high. I wouldn't say that I have friends that have been on like adventure shows and stuff like that, where you go out and
Yeah.
survive in the woods. I'm
So
not
you're not
that guy.
okay.
But I do I do a lot of hiking and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. You didn't get it back then. That's another part of that primal life too, just getting out. You feel that, right? I used to trail ride in the woods a lot, and I live about 2 miles from the beach, and I'm down there a lot. Just being connected to nature is so nice. Something about it, it reminds you that how small you really are, and there's something really, really, really cool about that too.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's very meditative. You know, you're
Yep.
obviously out. You know, you don't have as many devices and all the things that are around you and all the yeah. You get to forget about what's on Twitter or whatever for a while.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. A lot of times I'll leave my phone in my truck actually when I head down to the beach and just deconnect, for a little
Yeah.
bit, detach. So how do you tie in masculinity, and what are your thoughts on what's happening right now with a lot of like the Andrew Tate style content, which, I know it's a controversial topic, but I'm sure you've seen some of the content online. I didn't really hear about the guy until I started seeing it just go viral, but how it attaches to women, where it's speaking strongly on how men should provide, but also speaking, about some subject people don't love. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, Andrew and I have been in overlapping circles for many years, and I've never said anything bad about him, and he's never said anything bad about me. So I'm trying to keep it that way.
Okay.
But I mean, I've just never had any real interaction with him or watched a lot of his content. I know kind of what he says about certain things, but I mean, he's obviously really smart in terms of business, and for everybody I know who knows him, they're like he's a brilliant guy business wise.
Right.
And then as far as I think in many ways, he just got a lot of exposure for saying a lot of things that a lot of other guys are saying anyway. You know, if you look at, dating coaches and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of guys saying that kind of stuff, but he went out, he knew how to manipulate the media to get really big, in the way of saying it, because he's a smart guy. So,
Right.
I think, it's obviously, ways you wouldn't like to see people talk about treating women, and that maybe have to do with things that he said, but I can't point to anything specific.
Gotcha. One of the things that I saw that I really enjoyed that he was saying, which I agree, was he's saying like before money gets involved, the two areas that men can immediately increase their value as far as female perception is if they are dangerous, so they can protect the woman, so physical skill set, and two, they can pass on a lower level woman. So a man that they feel like is not just going to take any woman he can get, just the random girl from the bar. So like right away, two things a man can do before you start making real money is learn how to fight and learn how to pass on someone that's below your level because you're just lonely and horny that night. And I really
Oh,
did
absolutely.
agree with that.
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of guys have been saying that. I mean, I think one of the big things in that whole pickup artist scene, which is really what the manosphere was before it is whatever it is now. A lot of those things, the guys always used to say, it's what the growth mindset, or I forget what the word is that everybody uses for it. That there's tons of everything everywhere.
Oh, abundant.
Yeah. But mindset of plenty.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I don't need to take this one because there are many. Is basically the mindset that they always say, because then it makes women be like, hey, well, am I good enough? rather than like that you'll just take anything.
Something that I experienced.
Scarcity mindset. That's what I get away from a scarcity mindset.
There's not enough. Right.
Right.
Something I experienced with that, and I think I really can attest to this myself, is I'm divorced, and that's actually what led me into even reading some of the topics in the masculinity and men's movement. I started reading those books after my divorce and after my life kind of went to an all-time low, and I rebuilt it now to its all-time high, and I'm really grateful for that journey I went on. When I was dating, I quickly realized that wherever you were dating at with females, as far as the level, what you're willing to accept, was where you're going to stay. So for me, it was like I immediately started dating and I went for a level that was probably the easiest level for me to just get attention from.
Right.
And then after that, I was like, this isn't going to be wife long-term material. So I left there and continued to work on myself. And then when I redate again, you can continue to climb levels and attract higher level women when you are not engaging with lower level women. Like women can feel that almost. They have like an energy about them too.
Yeah. I mean, they assess your status in the world for sure.
Yeah. So where do you line up? What are your thoughts on dating, marriages, family? Like where do you line up with your movement on that?
I'm not a huge expert on that particular topic. I have a lot of friends who are, and so I get to see a lot of the information. It's a tough world right now. I mean, things aren't. There are a lot of guys who want to be like super traditional about everything, and we should. But the legal structure isn't there for that, and the support isn't there for that. Unless you're Mormon, the Mormons still like you'll get in a Mormon community and like if a wife cheats on her husband, then like she'll be shamed by her whole community, like rather than most people that wouldn't even be a thing. like they're like, oh, that's just some gossip, and so we live in a very different world. So I think it's tough for a lot of guys to navigate, and it's more power to them in many ways. I think there are no rules. Actually, Camille Paglia, who's a really interesting commentator, and I've been following her work since I was a kid. She wrote an essay many years ago called "No Law in the Arena." And that's kind of where we're at with a lot of people, because you have women who are making tons of money, you'll have men who are making tons of money, you have huge disparity in things. And where do they find balance? Is like, you really have to know yourself and then know your limits, I think, and know what is acceptable to you and what isn't.
Right. I agree with that. The system is definitely lean towards helping women get paid to leave marriages too. I went through that
For sure.
myself. I'm a father of a 4-year-old daughter, and I have half custody of her. But yeah, it was eye-opening for me to see what that world looks like. And me and my ex have a very good relationship. But even just what the divorce system and the court system how much strain it puts on a couple, it almost creates friction between them because it forces you into those scenarios. So that's a subject for sure. People need to really know what they're getting into when they get into marriage. And long-term partnership and pair bonding is amazing, and it's been around for thousands of years. And I think that is the way to be happiest, when you have those roles and you have a woman that's your supporting role and you're the providing protector role. But the government contracts and all the legalities, I don't think is as important. It doesn't change how you feel towards each other. I think the way the society is now, it makes women feel like they're not being honored in front of their peers if they're not given that government contract, the last name in the ring. And that's kind of what it turns into, is the pressure.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. And it is a shame that the government has to be involved in that, because
Right.
then it makes if you decide it didn't work out, it makes lawyers have to be involved.
It's a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. So a big topic too that I want to get with you is fitness. And Jack, how old are you?
48.
48. So you're in incredible shape to be 48 years old. You're 10 years older than me. And that's something I was going through your Instagram last night. I was looking at content. So how much priority do you put in your fitness as far as lifestyle on things like your nutrition, your discipline for how frequent you lift, and how much time does it consume in your day-to-day life to stay in shape like you do at your age?
A lot. I definitely say, because it's also part of my job. Like I need to look a certain way, because if you have a certain kind of message,
Yes.
if I'm like, hey, I want to tell you about masculinity today, and I'm this big slob and I look like garbage, it doesn't mean as much.
Yes.
And so you have to kind of be able to represent and be a vessel for the message. So it's an important part to me for that reason, and also you just feel better, and all the stuff that goes with being
Yeah, a lot of
in
perks.
shape.
You get a lot of perks. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, I already went to the gym this morning, and for me, honestly, at this point, I think for when people get started, it's all about discipline and like I got to go to the gym. For me, it's like I got to do like taxes and bookkeeping and stuff. Like going to the gym is fun and easy.
Yeah.
But it is hard to actually stay interested in a routine. After working out for like 15 years or whatever that I've probably been doing it seriously. That's a lot of the same thing. So after a while, it's like you got to just throw other things in, try new training methods, work with different people. Right now, I'm like, I should hire someone just to so I'm not just making up my own stuff, because I can.
Yeah.
But it's good to have accountability. It's just because especially if you're trying to operate at a fairly elite level. I mean, in terms of I guess I would probably be top 2% for 48-year-old guys.
I agree. Yeah, you look phenomenal.
And to stay there, I mean, because no one in life is going to care, so to stay there, you kind of have to have someone higher than you to be kind of pushing down, like a coach or something like that. If you can't find the perfect workout partner, which is ideal. But it takes a lot of time for sure.
I think the same about the coach. Obviously competing for a long time. I've been an athlete my whole life, and I've never really been out of shape. So one thing I always tell people, because I get a lot of messages about fitness related content, and I always say, hey guys, I want to be honest. I have never had to get back into shape, which is very different. So I never went out of shape, and that's so different. I've been an athlete my whole life, and I stayed there. So I think that there's a lot to that. When these guys message you, hey man, I'm 40 years old, I'm trying to get back into having kids, that's a very different ballgame that I don't have experience in, because I never navigated those waters yet.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I definitely have. I tend to be. I will get chubby if I let myself. So I'm just built that way. So I have to. It takes me a lot of effort to diet down to stay at a certain level. And there are a lot of guys who need to do that for the first time. And the funny thing is, it gets really exciting after the first time you do it. You're like, the first time you see your abs as an adult and you've never seen them before, you're like, oops, my shirt fell off. Yeah. you
You look
you
any
know?
excuse you can. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's very exciting. But then like the fourth or fifth time, you're like, okay, all right, now I'm just starving and it's boring. But
What does training look like for you now though? Like, is it an everyday thing and you're hitting the gym like bodybuilder style? Are you doing outdoor workouts? Are you doing long extended cardio? Like, what does training look like?
most days I go in and lift. Because I'm trying to focus on jiu-jitsu. Right. Last year I did more bodybuilding, and this year I kind of want to focus on moving towards my purple belt.
Yeah,
So
I'll talk about that in a few
I want to
minutes.
spend more time doing that, and balancing the two of those things is kind
They
of
don't go hand
difficult
in
because
hand.
you get kind of beat up, and so it's hard to do a full bodybuilding routine and also do that. So
Yes.
I've been trying to like experimenting with different, really testing myself. I experimented with HIT training recently, in terms of like, like that, could I work out for 2 days a week, but really hard for a few minutes, and I don't know if I trust that, but what I feel like I got out of it was that I was phoning in a lot of my workouts. I was just, because, you go through so many years, you're going through the motions of doing things. And I'm like, I
Right.
can actually lift a lot more weight on that machine than I thought I could. So I need to be doing that. So now I'll like go up to the more failure realm every day, but like not as many sets or reps, but
Gotcha.
I'll make sure that I'm failing, so that I know that I'm trying really hard rather than just doing like 4 sets of 15. Here we go. So I'm actually really bringing that intensity. And so that's what I've been working on to kind of lower my reps so that I can do more jiu-jitsu stuff. So I'm not just blowing out my elbows all the time,
I think that's where the most training value comes from, is that when you're really pushing to the extreme failure reps. I heard it
Yeah.
said best a long time ago by a fitness guy named Greg Plitt. I don't know if you remember him. He passed away, but he said it's so much better to hit a stick of dynamite with the sledgehammer once than tap it all day with a pencil. And
Right.
so, you go, if it's going to be something like chess, you go for an all out bench press pyramid where you're going to failure for 10 minutes. You'll get more than just going through all the reps of, of machine presses where you're not getting to real failure, real fatigue, real burn. What does diet look
Absolutely.
like?
Yeah.
What does
My
diet look like?
diet? I've been doing, I've had some bodybuilding guys do my diet over the years, and you just get into a routine of eating like they do, and running your macros in the way that seems to be what it's given me the best work. So, they'll have, like maybe 250 grams of protein a day, and then try and keep, for me, I'm about 5'10", 200 pounds. So I'll try and keep that around maybe 2,600 calories. And so it's basically fill in everything else, after you get your protein in. And that seems to be the way that I do it. It's boring, and it's not like, with one cheat day a week, that seems to be optimal. If I can be really on it for like 6 days a week and then have one cheat day, that seems to be like a livable space for me.
I agree. And I think that eating is always everyone's challenging part. But what you said earlier, which is so key, I speak about this often because I do see some people that lead like masculinity and male movements who simply don't look the part. And I had a conversation with a gentleman recently who, I do deeply care about. And we were just chatting. And I think that's part of what you said. Like, men need to be there for your homie. You need to get their back. And part of that is having those uncomfortable conversations with them and saying the things that they need to hear. And the conversation was like, hey, man, I know what you want to build, and I know what you're on the path to building, but there's a reason why I get more messages from men for leadership than you do. And it's because of the look. They see a lifestyle, they see a look, and people are going to go off that right away. Once again, no one ever said he was the weakest amongst us. That's why we followed him. So that is, leadership comes with that role. Like, that's why you see these guys as leaders now. Even Rogan, who became this huge influencer because his physical state has a lot to do with why he's so widely respected by men. And it is
for sure.
It's the first.
Yeah, I mean, you know that there's a guy who can go in and probably kick your ass.
Just be a useful man, a man of purpose.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely.
Eating is huge, and I think it's really important. And
Mhm.
one thing I'm sure you'll agree with this. Sometimes when you're following a macro too, and you're eating specifically, sometimes the discipline isn't not eating food. Sometimes it's getting the food down.
Yeah.
Does it happen with you? It's like getting the meat down, and when you're like, man, I have to wash it down with water sometimes, and just like get the meals in.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's different. I mean, there's guys who have a high enough metabolism that they're like, I can't eat enough, and I wish I had their problem, but then they wish they had mine.
Right.
There seems to be one way or the other.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I could eat all day long, but like if I do, I'll be 300 pounds.
Right.
So but it, especially when it's boring food. Like I just had whatever, chicken rice, which is what everybody lives on when they do bodybuilding stuff, or a giant turkey sandwich. I make, it's like 8 ounces of turkey on on the half sliced bread, so it's a little bit of carbs and a lot of fucking turkey. So, I mean, it's a boring sandwich. I eat it every day. So,
but
I will tell you that I have started to take breaks with that. I'm like, I'll eat a few bites and I'll look at my phone for a minute. And I'm like, because it's just boring to eat.
Yeah. It's mouth work. Something I was saying a while back too, and this is true, is like, if you really zoom out and you ask about eating, like eat like a man is a very simple process. You say, hey, like you want to look like a man, eat like a man. What did the warriors eat of our society? They were not eating cookies, cake, pastries, pies, candies, Lucky Charms. They weren't eating that shit.
Yeah, right? It's food for kids, right?
They were eating eggs and steak and meat and whatever they could get a hold of. And they were on that sustenance, and the hormones are definitely optimized. So the food is important. Now let's jump into the good topic here, is jujitsu, which has been a passion of mine for so long. What would you say right now? How long have you been training, first of all?
About 4 years.
4 years. That's a good time. Yeah. What would you say was your biggest realization when you got in, about year 1 or 2, when you really realized hey, I'm going to stick with this? What was it for you that you realized you wanted to stay with it for?
Well, I mean, I would say that I actually started out, when I started studying martial arts, I started with striking.
Yep.
I actually started in Sambo. And then in the second week of class, we did a trip and I broke my ankle. And so I'll take a break with Sambo, after the 3 months of rehab,
Yeah, right.
But then I from there, I just went to straight striking, and I did that for a long time, and trained with an American boxing coach and whatever, and did that for a while.
I'm doing that now.
You only need to get punched in the head for so long and so often. And the other thing is, as you get older, I realized that, I stayed away from jiu-jitsu for a while, because every time I would go to learn something, I'm like, this is 17 steps. This takes boxing is 1, 2, 3, and jiu-jitsu is then put the thing over here, and then there's a lot of, it's like Twister. But then it's also something you can do. You hear about the Gracies and all those people who did it up into their 70s and 80s, and I'm like, well, I'm not getting any younger, and I'm just only getting slower as far as boxing is concerned. So let me go and do something that has some longevity to it.
Yeah.
And so that was really one of the main reasons. But it's one of those things, and the same is true with all martial arts. I think really, there's this threshold of where it's all just really frustrating. And then there's a certain point that you pass over, I could get good at this part, and then that's kind of exciting. When you have a few things that you're okay, I kind of got that. I'm good at this part. That I would still say my jiu-jitsu is I would still say it's bully, big guy, garbage jiu-jitsu, but
more game. Well, yeah. What we always say, I competed. This was my life for a long time, and what we'd always say is the first breakthrough would happen where, now the gym I came from, my coach is a multiple-time world champion, a very hardcore Brazilian. He came from the Carlson Gracie Academy, and I'm so grateful. As I've traveled to a lot of the huge academies around the nation. I've been to a good 50 jiu-jitsu schools on visits, high name stuff. I used to film for a tournament we own called Jits King. And I've been able to visit some really high level gyms. And I'm so grateful for the type of gym I was raised in for jiu-jitsu, because we were as hardcore as it gets. But you didn't know that because that's what we knew. And we would scrap in that gym. And we had this thing called the welcome. Welcome was, especially a guy like you, big guy comes in 200 pounds with a hard look. Your first class, our coach would put you with me or one of the higher level guys in the room, and he would give this little signal. He would go like this. And that means smash him, just make him so miserable, make him, because he wanted to test the heart. He was right. A bully can't handle that. A bully, his ego would be too fragile and he would never come back. And he was jiu-jitsu is way too powerful to teach to bullies or to weak mind men. So the guys who could come back thinking they were going to get that day 2, and then they might get a little bit of it. By the time they come back day 3, hey, welcome to the team. Now we teach you. But before that, it was just rough, aggressive, intense. And we'd be oh, hey, man, he wanted us to make it look like it was us just playing, and they just couldn't stand a chance, is what he liked for us. what we said is like, hey, the biggest breakthrough happens with someone when they come in and they train for a few months, and now they get their first time to go with a day one student. That's their similar size and weight. And that's when they realize they've learned jujitsu, because they're in the room and everyone's getting good together. And so they're not gonna, I'm a black belt, he's a white belt. He's not gonna begin to tap me as he learns. But when he gets that next new guy and he executes a sweep or hits his first triangle or he gets his first rear naked choke from the back, there's this moment where they're like, oh, right. It's amazing. And it's so motivating. And just the addiction starts, and it has a way of really getting in your head, and you go home and you're working it out. Like, how could I escape that position? How could I stop that guy from escaping now? And you just, for me, it was like that anyways, all consuming.
Yeah. It definitely comes more so over the years too. Before, like when I first couple of years, I wasn't the guy. I was like, when I went to jiu-jitsu, I was focused on jiu-jitsu. And then when I come home, I wasn't sitting on the internet watching like, things or whatever. But now it's like, I have enough of a game. I'm like, I'll see something on Instagram. I'm like, oh, I would do that. That seems like other things like I would never do that. But I'm like, oh yeah, that seems like it fits into my game.
And the levels are so amazing. Yeah. Sorry. The levels are so amazing too with it. Something, one of the most memorable trips for me was we did a trip when I was filming. Are you familiar with Nick Rodriguez? Do you follow the sport at all?
I've heard his name. Yeah.
So he was training. So we went to film him for an event. He was fighting in UFC Fight Pass, and we went to film for an event. And I spent a week there training with him, Gordon Ryan, and Donna, her Death Squad. So I got a chance to train with those guys, stay with those guys, and spend time with them. And that I was already a black belt at this time, competing in a high level. And I remember rolling with Gordon Ryan and being just absolutely astonished that the level got to that level. Like I thought I knew what good was until that. And that was like this realization of like, wow, like this is what the top guy at the time he was establishing. Now he's hands down the top guy in the world. This was 6 years ago. So he was establishing, trying to say, was he? Now he's beat everyone. But I remember grappling with this guy and being like, I feel like I'm a white belt and I've been training for 15 years. And that's the cool thing about the art. And he'd been training less time than me. So it's amazing how good it's one of those. I heard Jocko say it best, where it's, his kid asked him, Daddy, are there superpowers in the world out there? And he thought for a minute and he said, yeah, jiu-jitsu. It's like, it's the only thing I've ever seen that when you have that, you have an actual dominion over someone physically.
Right.
And I love it. So back to what you said about bodybuilding, which I do have, something to add with that, was that when I was training and I was at my best, it was when most of my training was kettlebell style training, yoga type stretching, pool training, cycling, where I had an engine, I had explosiveness, and I was very flexible. Mm-hmm. And it was like after I finally was like, okay, I'm not competing anymore. That was when I was finally able to start putting on muscle, which I always wanted to do, but I knew it would stiffen me up and it would take away part of my game. My game was very flexibility based. So there is something to that, right?
There is, and there's the two conflicting mindsets. Like, do I get skinny legs so I can do triangles, or do I get gigantic bodybuilder legs so I can't do anything?
Yeah, or to your guard's hard to pass. So it is. You see some guys, like you see Gordon Ryan, who's into bodybuilding. It's amazing what he's like an amateur bodybuilder. He looks great like one. Yeah. But I feel like he learned jiu-jitsu when he was in his teens and very flexible. Then you added the muscle after. So, you can definitely be effective in both, but it does help someone who's got movement. Like we always say, like the more movement, if you think about a Swiss Army knife as the body, and you think like all the little attachments on the knife, if there's an attachment that each one was the different movement your body could make, you just want to have the most complete Swiss Army knife. So your body you can hit a nice bridge, you can hip out well, right? Your spine can bend, you can twist, your arm, you have some more flexibility so you don't have to tap to everyone you get in. That stuff does play a role in it.
Right.
Yeah. So what can men do to start living a better life? Let's talk about that. Like if you're a man right now, let's talk about a gentleman who's just now getting out of high school. He's confused. He's 18, 19 years old. He wants to make a man out of himself. What direction would you point him in?
Well, that's the easiest guy because he has the whole life in front of him. Like,
yep.
I've gotten questions on Instagram from guys who are like, I'm 21 and I've already ruined my life. And I'm trying to get it together. I'm like, you haven't even started.
Right?
You haven't even started yet. Like you can do anything from 21. So, I mean, that's a great place to be in because you can, I mean, man, I started jiu-jitsu at like 42. like 42, 43, something like that. So like, yeah, man, if I could have started that at 21, that would have been, I'd be a black belt now. Yeah,
That's when I started.
yeah. I mean, that would be great. And that's really where I would push people. It's become a cliche, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, with jiu-jitsu and things like that. It's kind of the best way for men to have that competitive thing in their life and also not get brain damage and really get to be competitive every day
Yes.
and have that question.
Yeah.
And I think about it all the time. I mean, and if you've done it, you do. It's like to have that question every day. Am I going to let this win? Am I going to just ride the timer out on this one?
Or am I going to try?
Or am I going to try? Or,
Yeah.
am I going to keep going? That for men to have that situation in their life every day or like every 3 times a week or whatever, that's huge. Because you don't have that anywhere else.
Yeah, you just hit a big point that we have to dive into for a second. That is huge right there. And it's like, I moved to a new city 3 years ago after my divorce in St. Petersburg, Florida is where I'm at now, right outside of Tampa, Florida. And I connected with a big group of men, and everyone was like on the primal movement, and everything was like these terms were used in social media, like primal and warrior. But I started, a lot of these guys, I'm like, you guys aren't that thing you say you are. You just go to the gym and you're saying warrior. It's not the same as you think it is. And something I will say, like, and it translates into business very well, is like what you learn on the mat is exactly that. It's like, it's not fucking over until it's over, right? It's not over. So you could have lost for the last 4 minutes and you can still find a way to escape mount, sweep, get on top and finish the guy. And then you realize, wait, I won still. It didn't look great the whole time, but I still won that. And there's like a deep message there that it's like, you just keep clawing and scratching and figuring out and thinking and being calm, and you'll problem solve your way out of it. And when you develop that, especially for young men, right? And sometimes the guy that looks intimidating to you and looks like he's going to win, and you might have a match where you let someone, a training session, you let someone intimidate you physically. And then later you go, you know what? I was just scared of what he looked like. He didn't have better jiu-jitsu than me. The next time you dominate, you're a kid, that's huge confidence booster for you. Because you're like, wait, it's all fair. It's all fair. It's skill versus skill, problem versus problem, strategy versus strategy. And yeah, I agree. That is probably the first direction I would ever point a young man, is get into jiu-jitsu, because you're going to learn a lot about yourself on those mats.
Yeah. And the other thing about that is, you go to the gym and everybody has their headphones on. And so nobody talks to you. Yeah. Right. But obviously when you've been doing rounds and you're sitting on the floor, I have a guy at the gym who like knows I'm a writer and comes up and talks to me about writing stuff every day. Like people reach out and come and ask you questions and do all kinds of stuff. And so that's how you meet people, like that, who are of value too, because they're actually doing something, rather than like, you can go sit at a bar and meet whoever, or, you can go to jiu-jitsu and at least they're trying to better themselves. So that's why they're there.
Right. And yeah, that's another part, at least about network. How important would you say network is for men?
Huge. Yeah. I mean, I think network is super important for men. Part of my writing has always been that we get our identity from where we fit into groups of men. So if you don't have a group of men, it makes men nervous when they don't have a group of men that they fit into, because they're missing a part of their identity. Because they can just imagine whatever their identity is. That's kind of the lone wolf guy who is like, I'm amazing, I'm such a tough guy and whatever. But if you actually have a group of men who actually are all at a similar level, you don't have that same self-perception, because men figure out where they fit into certain pecking orders and where they compete with other men and where they fit in groups of men. And if you don't have that, then you really don't know yourself very well. And the more you do that, the more you feel comfortable dealing with other men, then you are comfortable in a wider range of situations. So that's important. And also, obviously for network, for anyone, I've moved around a lot in my life, and it takes about 1.5 years, I think, in a new city to even really know where things are. Like this is the guy for this, and this is the guy for that, and this is where I get my haircut, and all that stuff. And, but it makes me jealous of the people who've lived at the same place all their lives. Because you've known so and so for a long time. Everybody. I have a buddy up in Salt Lake City. He's lived there all his life. He knows everybody. And so if he needs a window put in, I got a window guy. I got a tire guy. He has all the guys. So, and he's a tattoo artist. So like that's he meets people that way. So he knows just everybody. And so I mean, other men as a resource, to have a guy for everything
Yeah.
is a really big thing to have.
Yeah, network is huge, and the jiu-jitsu mats is for sure, or the martial arts school, because they'll call you out. Like, something about the brotherhood of martial arts is they'll talk ruthless shit to your face, but defend you behind your back. And that's what I found, and that's how it should be in the tribe of men. It's
Mhm.
like, if you're the guy who's getting roasted that day, you're getting roasted by the whole squad. 10 guys are like, you come in making fun of your sandals you happen to wear that day, and it's just going to be an all good fun, but it's just relentless. But that same group of people is not going to let someone talk shit about you behind your back, because that's your tribe, and that's what's very important, versus the other way around, what a lot of people do in other circles. Right, very nice to the face, and when the guy leaves, they had things to say, and that's who I don't trust in men. Is when I'm like, yeah, that's your buddy. I thought that was your friend, and now there's
Yeah.
a girl around, you're talking about this, so that's very true. In other words, network, for the other reason, is sometimes, reaching up in network, you have a different conversation with these men. Something that my season of life, I'm in the business season of life, and I've been in that mode now where I've got guys who are doing 10, if not 100 times better than me financially. I've got guys who literally have private jets, and I spend time with these gentlemen, and the conversation is very different. We talk about, it's not about who's going to bang the girl at the club and who's ordering a bottle. It's like, how can we avoid paying $2 million in taxes from this real estate sale we did, and what's the next move here? What currency is going to fluctuate? So network is huge, and having a martial arts skill set, what I've found, is something that does make you stand out amongst high level men.
Mhm.
Everyone wants the fighter, everyone wants the protector around them, and they want to be allies too. So it's for young men especially, it will help them connect. Now, moving into older men, let's say you're the guy who's reinventing his life. So you were like me at 35, you got divorced, or you're 40 and you're in this place where you're not in shape, you don't feel put together. What would you suggest a man go do to start to rebuild his life?
I mean, in that case, yeah, definitely the getting in shape part.
Mhm.
That's huge, because
Yeah.
I've said this a lot, and because I've changed my body a lot over the years. You said you were always an athlete, and
Yeah.
you've always been inhabited that. And I went to art school. Was never athletic, never did anything like that. And man, when you change your body, you inhabit a different form, and you actually become a different person.
Yeah. You
Because
do.
because the reason why you're putting this different bodysuit that you have on, people react to it differently. Like you said, in the way that people can, your presence for martial arts and whatever. Just if you're a bigger guy, if you're like a bigger, built guy, people look at you differently. They talk to you differently. You get handsome guy privilege. Like there's a different thing that goes on around you in the world.
True.
Whereas if you're kind of sloppy and a dad bod out of shape guy, people treat you like that.
Mhm.
So it is, and when people react to you as if you are something,
You feel
you
it.
become it. you,
Exactly.
you feel it, and you become it. You eventually you inhabit that body, and that's your expectation. Well, of course you should. That becomes who you are.
Yeah, exactly. There's a really amazing book called. Have you heard of a book called Psycho Cybernetics?
No, no.
So I've heard this book, and it's I skimmed it. I actually just watched a YouTube summary because I heard it referenced in a TED talk, and it was pretty amazing. And this gentleman was a plastic surgeon, and this was like the early 80s and 90s, and he noticed such an amazing transformation in people's identity after something major was fixed and how the world perceived them. He then began to study psychology, became a psychologist and an author, and wrote this entire book about how we believe the world perceives us changes how we show up completely. But like, he showed deep studies on this. So someone that had like a nose they weren't happy with would get a nose job, something small, but it would fix their nose, and their entire life would change so dramatically, their life results, because now suddenly they just feel that they're being treated differently, and they show up differently, more bold,
Yeah.
more confident, more risk taker, more in the public eye, more in the space. So I agree. Men, that's the first thing men need to take care of, is their physical stature. What do you think about provisions, being provider for families or for your woman?
Well, it just depends what the situation is, because everybody has a different financial situation and where they are. I mean,
Right.
you could be a complete schmuck and be out of shape but have tons of money.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be at that point in life, because a lot of guys, I know a guy who does style consulting, and he does a lot of style consulting for guys who are in the tech industry. And it's like these guys are just been going to work in their sweatpants, writing code, and got rich doing it. But like now
They
they
won't
realize
go.
they're millionaires and and can't go
Yep.
anywhere. They
No,
need to
I
like
know
look
guys
a
just like
certain
that.
way,
Yep.
so that's a big factor. But obviously, especially the way things are today, I mean, you definitely have to be conscious of money and the way things are going. And I think it's obviously something that all of us, there's some guys who are just focused on money, and that's one thing. And then, yeah, but I think all of us need to be able to be smart and financially literate.
Right.
You know?
Right. Just make everyone feel safe. I love it,
Yeah.
man. I love it. Well, Jack, it was an absolute pleasure having you today, man. We're going to wrap it up to keep episodes too long. Where can people find you and where can they connect with you at?
Well, I'm on Instagram at Start the World. And I'm trying to build up my Twitter now. I didn't get it until Elon Musk bought it, and then I was like,
Same,
"I'll give it a try."
same.
So,
Yeah.
my Twitter, my name was taken though, so it's PH2T3R is my name on Twitter, and that's coming up. I'm doing well on that, and my website is jack-donovan.com, and all my books are on Amazon.
Love it. You have anything you want to send any message out? Any sign offs?
Not particularly. I always use Stay Solar because that's kind of one of my biggest essays that I've written. So
I love it. Jack, it was an absolute pleasure, brother. Thank you so much. We're going to jump off live.
thanks.